Welcome everyone to the Q&A session for our upcoming course, Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA. The 7-week journey to clear inherited patterns and other energetic imprints to liberate your authentic self. I'm Lisa Bonis, and I'm really looking forward to this Q&A conversation for the Shift Network, where we'll explore the teachings of Wendy Rosa and address questions about her upcoming 7-week course, Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA, which begins Wednesday, February 5th. And a little later, I'll explain how you can participate in the course, even if you can't attend the live sessions. But first, I want to introduce our guest. Wendy Rosa is an internationally respected intuitive energy healer, speaker, teacher, and author. She's the founder of the School of Intuitive Studies and the Intuitive Healer Training Program. She's a MindValley.com author whose book, Energy Healing Through the Chakras, A Guide to Self-Healing, is an Amazon bestseller. Wendy's also a contributing author to the best-selling book, Bouncing Back, Thriving in Changing Times. Her most recent book is Expanding Your Heart, Awakening Through 4 Stages of a Spiritual Opening. And in just a few minutes, we'll open up for your questions. But first, I want to welcome Wendy, who's going to begin our session by leading us in an opening meditation. Welcome, Wendy. It's great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's great to be back. Hello, everyone. Let's take a moment and close our eyes and settle in and arrive here in this moment. I'm going to close my eyes, and you can as well. So we'll take a moment and just take your hand to your heart first. And make that connection from the palm of your hand to the center of your heart chakra, your heart center. And that awareness of bringing a connection to your heart starts to deepen your breath. And begins the process of settling your energy down from head to heart. And then maybe even heart down to belly. And then belly to root. If you're drawing an energetic line of awareness down into the lower half of your body. And then you can let your hand relax, perhaps on your lap or wherever you're sitting, just palms facing up, maybe even palms facing down, just relaxing your hands simply on your legs. And then we'll extend that line of energy from your tailbone and from your pelvis down into the earth. And we're going to extend it through this vision of your grounding cord. And your grounding cord actually isn't a skinny line of energy from the tail down to the earth. It's wider. So envision this image of your grounding cord nice and secure around the sides of your hips, front of your low belly, low spine, and allow it to extend down deep through the layers of the earth where it sprouts roots into the core. And there's a great sphere of grace around you, around myself, around each of us here now, and those who will listen back in the future. That we're held in this powerful state of connection, of grace, and of evolution. We are evolving our consciousness together as a collective. I pray that my connection is open to grace and I receive that light through my crown to my third eye, throat, and heart, continuing down into the earth. May it be protected by pure love. I pray for a powerful and beautiful connected time today on our Q&A call, working through processing, connecting, and receiving information about deeper shame held in the body. I pray that this information support you wherever you are in yourself. Thank you, God. So be it. And so it is. And then slowly, as you're ready, you can come back here into connection and open your eyes.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. That was a great way to start this out. All right. So now we have the rest of our time together to answer our viewers' questions for Wendy as we prepare for her upcoming course. Again, that's called Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA, and it begins Wednesday, February 5th. And if you want to check out the website and learn more about the 7-week course, you can visit transformingshame.com to see the full description. So let's go ahead and get into some questions. If you have a question for Wendy, go ahead and type it in, and I'll be happy to read them out loud. And in the meantime, we've got a couple questions already submitted. So let's start out with what I think is a perfect way to begin. This is a great foundational question. Lorraine wants to know, would you explain what you mean by spiritual DNA? Is that different from our physical DNA?
Yes. So it is different than our physical DNA. Essentially, our spiritual DNA is our soul's blueprint. It's how our soul carries information from lifetime to lifetime and then into this physical body. And what we're carrying in our spiritual DNA is our past life experiences, our glories, our wounds, our relationships, connections to others, information or imprinting that would have happened prior to this lifetime that our soul carries. We bring that into our existence and into our body, and that imprints upon our physical DNA. So sometimes our soul a blueprint, or our soul spiritual DNA rather, is carries intergenerational information as well as past life information. And so that embeds into our body, into our cells, and into our DNA.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So then let's take a slightly different direction. Terry wants to know, how does one know or differentiate if the fear and shame that one is holding on to is from this life or past lives or ancestral?
Yeah. So here's what's interesting about emotions in the body is that sometimes we won't know. Sometimes the emotion is so present or being activated or triggered in a moment that the only way we do know is by tuning in. And sometimes, I'm going to say this, is that sometimes the why or the needing to know can be a block to actually accessing the information or accessing the clearing, being able to clear the emotions. When we allow ourselves to emote or feel to the depth of the feeling, we can actually clear or release from the body what's stored deeper in the body around that particular emotion, whatever that particular emotion is associated with. Meaning if it has a past life association, a particular lifetime, or whether it has, something in this lifetime, or whether it has something intergenerational. What can happen here is that when we breathe in and allow a feeling to process to its depth, it's almost like taking a shovel and digging down deep with our breath and with our awareness and being able to gather in what's stored in the body. Now, emotions are emotions. So we're human beings. We want to have emotions. That makes us human. If we didn't have emotions, there potentially could be, an issue on the other side of not having an emotion or emotions per se, if we were void of them. Part of our emotional experience in our body and having our feelings is innate, and we're going to have the emotions. Now, what I'm talking about is when we have the history of stored, unprocessed emotions. So if I was, for example, if I was, raised where a wound of abandonment was really real for me, it was part of my history, part of my story. And I had an experience in recent life where somebody leaves and that feeling of abandonment gets triggered. I can trace that emotion and that feeling of loss down to my history, down to my story from childhood. But then if I were to go into it deeply, it's very possible that my intuition might start to present awarenesses, pictures, or images that aren't related to this lifetime. Not all the time. That's not always going to be the case, but sometimes we can simply get a sense of, wow, this feeling is old. This emotion is old. And so, yes, so sometimes we won't know the difference, or if it's intergenerational, or if it's past life, or if it's present. But if you allow yourself to feel the feeling first and start processing the feeling, the why, the how, the information can come afterwards, after the body processes the feeling.
Hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for that. I wonder if we should backtrack just a touch here and let's talk about the definition of shame. You and I were talking before we started here about my dad. He used shame to keep us in line, that there should be more shame to sort of keep people in line. And so that way you behave because you're ashamed of bad behavior. And you mentioned that he's more talking about having integrity, but he's using a different word. So when you're talking about shame, what is it that you're saying?
hmm Yes, I think this is really important to differentiate. So shame innately is the feeling of I am bad on a deep level. I am innately something is bad and wrong about myself. I don't belong here. I'm not okay. Who I am isn't okay. All of those feelings are the depth, the depth of shame, the depth feelings around shame. And what what happens here is that in the energy system, where shame is also it's a bonding tactic. So essentially, what that means is that we've been raised in environments where our sense of belonging is bonded to a particular tribe. And because I'm bonded in that tribe, and that means our family of origin, it means I speak the language, it means that we align on our same beliefs, on our same principles, on our same survival mechanisms. We're the same in many ways. I belong to this tribe. I have a sense of belonging. If I were to leave the tribe, go out beyond the tribe and individuate and distinguish myself, my ideas, my visions, my awarenesses, my sense of self separate than tribal belief, then shame is often used as a bonding tactic, not consciously, because it's motivated by fear. It's motivated by the fear that who I am, it's motivated by the fear that that you're going to abandon them, that they're going to lose you, that there won't be enough to connect and bond on, that you're going to be different. And losing you, if you were the one leaving, for in this example, is a deep fear. And so the tactic is to project project expectations or to shame someone back into a sense of belonging so that we're together. That principle lives inside our existence often. If I were to if I were to differentiate myself or not be able to feel my sense of belonging in my family of origin and in my tribe, and I go off into my life, and there wasn't a place for me to ground or belong in my tribe growing up, innately I'm going to be living with this sense of I don't belong here. Who I am isn't okay. I'm different, simply because what lives in my existence is that there wasn't really that that sense of welcoming, that belonging, that tribal bond of, you can individuate, you can be whoever it is you want to be. So shame in our system, it's there's many layers to it. One of which I'm speaking about is the tribal shame that bonds us to a tribe inside our system, even if we've left the tribe. It's that monkey mind voice, that monkey mind voice of, I shouldn't do this, it's not okay, who I am isn't okay, because I've left this innate tribe. Now, shame is also carried with us in our spiritual DNA, in that it comes out of experiences we had in past life initially, or intergenerationally initially, that were painful. So we had experiences that did not resolve. We had experiences that did not repair. We had experiences where we've been hurt, we've been shamed, we've been perhaps killed in previous life experiences. And in our spiritual DNA, we carry that information into our physical life and into this body and into our existence. And when we carry that information, we're holding information in our body that we don't have connection for in the system that we might have been raised in. The system says, be a good person, or the system says go off to school, or the system says become a lawyer, become a doctor, become something I want you to become, and that's acceptable and that's okay. But we come into this life, and then we're carrying with us information in our DNA and our spiritual DNA that we don't even understand. It's so deeply subconscious that there can be innate shame that we're carrying a shadow that we can't even access on a cognitive level, because it's not cognitive. It's deeply embedded in the energy body and in the energy system. So these are some aspects. I feel like we're going to have to unpack more here in this conversation about shame, even as other questions come in, because there's actually a lot to say about how complex shame is in our system.
Good thing you have 7 weeks to talk about it, right?
Yes.
Here's an interesting question from Barbara, who says, is there something that you realized about shame recently that prompted you to design this program? And is your approach basically to clear the chakras of shame?
This is a great question. So I've run a few empath courses here at the Shift Network, and it was amidst a lot. It was amidst the Me Too movement. It was amidst it was amidst a lot of political shadow that we're still in. It was amidst an awakening of empaths, feeling like I have this gift, I have this ability, and I don't know where to go with it. And the empath conversation, or the label of the empath, is just exploded, because finally people are able to make sense of their experience energetically. Well, in the energy body, here's what I was discovering in the courses I was teaching, is that shame was huge. And this is what it looks like in the energy body, is that empathic intuition specifically. So whether you identify as an empath or not, the ability to be empathic or have empathy is an operation of the lower chakras. It's actually the second and third chakras that feel empathically what's going on beneath the table. Up above, in the upper half of our body, is where we're conscious. That's where we come into awareness about what we're seeing, what we're getting. We can perceive what's happening. But below the belt, essentially, is where we feel energy, and we take that energy into our experience, or into our bodies sometimes. Now, what the trainings have been about is about how to not absorb the energy in the body, and instead hold center in the body, being able to increase the power of the root, the second and the third chakras, because those are the human power centers in how we horizontally engage in the world on an energetic level. It's how we have our relationships and our personal power and our boundaries. This is lower body. So what was happening is that in order to come back into center, inside ourselves as sensitive and empathic beings, we had to start to look at what was there that was pushing us out on an energetic level. So if there's wounds in the body, in the lower half of the chakra system, or any chakra for that matter, the soul starts to displace itself. It moves somewhere else in the energy system. Not entirely. I would say our light does, our consciousness starts to disconnect from the power in those areas of the body. Well, as we want to bring that power back in, we have to feel what was displacing it. And a lot of times what was displacing it were all the aspects of shame. I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. Who I am isn't okay. It's not okay for me to speak my truth. My feminine, whether you're male or female, was suppressed. And so this idea of this awareness really of how big shame is in our subconscious. Shame is it's a very concave, on a somatic level, very concave emotion in the body. It has us kind of curl in on ourselves. It's very visceral in the body when we feel it. And shame is one of the shadow emotions of the second chakra. So it's also, the second chakra is one of the power centers for empathic intuition. So shame and empathic intuition are existing out of the same power center in the body. It's second and third. It's not just the second. But those two power centers are negotiating space. Here I am feeling everything that's going on, but shame puts a blanket on our true self. It puts a blanket on our truth. And so if I want to be able to understand the empathic experience I'm having and be able to feel my center, I need to be able to step forward in myself and have boundaries. But to do that, I need to be able to believe in myself, and I need to process the shame and all of the levels of shame that I'm holding inside myself. So are we clearing shame in the chakras? Absolutely. Because the level of shame we're working with in this particular program is the history of it. It's the impact of how shame has embedded through lifetimes and through lineage into this experience. And it's the energy you're holding, you may be holding on a subconscious level that you don't even know you're holding. It's the subconscious imprinting held in the lower half of the body. So this is what inspired me to start really addressing the shame piece head on. I believe truly in my heart of hearts that the sensitives, the empaths, those who can share and show empathy. Empathy is what's going to heal this planet ultimately. But we have to be able to, especially those who are sensitives and intuitives and empathic, we have to be able to reparent and rebuild what was shamed about being sensitive and about being empathic, and what was injured about that. We carry that in our system, and we're in this process of transforming that awareness that actually empaths are needed in this world. They're amazing space holders and truth sayers, and they're needed in this world. And so the work, because I believe so much in the role of what powerful intuition can do and serve and be in on a collective level and on an individual level, it's so important to me that we really start looking at healing shame, not just the conversation of shame, but really getting into the subconscious around shame.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. That was a very powerful answer. This next question is, is very layered. So give me a second to read this out. This is Janice who wants to know, how do you let go of shame from something you could not possibly control? My mother died in labor with me, and her sister, my aunt, raised me and blamed me. Now, on the surface, this looks like this isn't necessarily an inherited shame because this happened in this woman's lifetime. But the fact that the aunt chose to shame her for something that wasn't in any way her fault seems to me like shame does pass on through the generations. So, how can Janice get over this type of shame? Big question.
Yeah, it's a big question, and I'll give a perspective on it, and it's not going to be the whole perspective or the whole answer because really it's going to require some unraveling and healing. But here's what I'll say is that I imagine the aunt, and I'm not justifying the experience, but I'm not justifying her actions of shaming. But I imagine the aunt felt out of control and probably hopeless and helpless and probably in an immense grief and didn't have the tools or the awarenesses on how to take care of herself around what she was experiencing. And through her helpless, hopeless, devastated state, went into shame and blame. And perhaps, again, I'm making this up because I don't know, perhaps that's part of the culture. And in fact, shaming is very much part of the culture. It's very much part of the system, and it's part of certain generations in the system. So if I were to, sort of, I'm making up the scenario, but if it were that her survival tactic to manage the emotion and the situation was to go into shame and blame, then the child, you as the child, has the impact of that experience. Now, as a child, you're absorbing that information and it does inform your system. It becomes part of what you carry and what you think and believe about yourself. But here's what happens in the healing process is that as a spiritually progressing soul, we always have the ability to transform, and that's our responsibility. We can't change the story, we can't change what happened, but we can transform and find the power of our inner essence and our human spirit to be able to transform how our body carries that energy going forward. And what some parts of that process might be that there's an acknowledgement of what's true. Underneath shame is your truth. What's your actual deepest truth here? Was it your fault? No, it wasn't your fault. Was I a bad person? Am I bad? No, I'm not a bad person. It's really getting to the essence of the truth of your core. Let me back up to say this too, and bring this piece in, is that at the core of our spiritual DNA, we are good. We are innately light. We are brilliant. We are born of God essence. That is our innate true light and our goodness and our greatness. That's at the core of the spiritual DNA. What clouds it, or what layers on top of it, is our imprinting, our life experiences that impacted. So I would invite you to imagine, visualize getting into the core essence of your goodness and your greatness, and seeing your truth, your light, your goodness, like feeling that in your body. Now that might come along with some very important emotions that need to be felt. And this is where shame also plays in our energy system, is that when shame has been projected, when we've been shamed on us, it often can result from someone who has a difficult time having their own emotions. There's too much shame in having their own feelings that I'm going to shame and blame someone else. Well, as the recipient of that, someone who has been shamed, now I'm given the information that it's not okay for me to feel my feelings. And whether I realize this or not, there's shame around me having grief. I have to breathe through the shame layer first to be able to allow myself to have an authentic emotion. I mean, how many times do we hear things like, I'm sorry, I'm crying right now. I'm so sorry. I don't want to make a scene, or I'm sorry. I have anger. Anger is interesting simply because we can suppress anger and we can project anger, but to actually have anger even requires us to breathe through shame or acknowledge that it's okay for me to have anger. Sort of to release the belief of shame collectively or historically in the family around shame. That anger's bad. Don't have anger. It's not okay. We need to have our anger. We need to have all of our emotions. So basically what I'm saying here in response to the question is to give yourself the authentic feelings. You're going to have some true feelings about being shamed. And those feelings need to be felt as part of the healing process. The other part of the healing process is that you really get connected to the core of your true DNA, your true light in your being, and know that innately in your heart, in your being, in your soul, you are good. You are a good person. Where this course takes you deeper, the course that I'm going to be teaching, is that we start to go into the subconscious to start to clear on an energetic level in the body where we're holding that imprinting. So it may be possible that energy needs to be cleared out of the body around this situation. Projected shame and blame. We do need to clear that from our energy body. And so that's what we're going to be going into in this course. So I hope that helps in answering the question.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for tackling it. Like I said, that's a very big question, and I threw a lot at you, so thank you for addressing it. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Wendy DeRosa learning about her upcoming course, Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA, which begins Wednesday, February 5th. And you can log on to transformingshame.com for all the details and to register. So let's go ahead and get back into questions. We've got a lot of them coming in. Here's one that's asking, you've sort of touched on this, but let's go into the question anyway. Is there a link between shame and self-sabotaging behaviors? And if so, could you explain what's happening energetically in the body?
Absolutely. So when we've been raised, so I'm going to talk about the root chakra for a moment, because root chakra at the tailbone area of the body is about it's the marinade that we grew up in. So it's the vibe, it's the nonverbal rules or teachings that have come through. It's our safety, our survival, our trust, and our belonging, our sense of existence, and how we ground into ourselves and how we're taken care of on that physical level. So if I were raised in an environment where it was clear to me that I wasn't going to be good enough. It was clear to me that whatever I did or how much I did or how much somebody needed from me, it never was going to be enough. And I started to, and maybe this came through the lineage. Maybe I got this on a nonverbal level from a parent. So now in my root area of my body, I'm starting to internalize that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. Whatever I do, whoever I am, I'm not enough. And then so maybe I develop some perfectionism, survival tactics. I become a perfectionist because out of the feeling of not being enough. And in this perfectionism, I'm doing so much, I'm taking care of so much, I'm making sure everyone's okay, and I'm starting to overcompensate for this feeling that innately who I am isn't enough. Well, let's say now part of this perfectionism is part of my self-sabotage. Or let's say I start to sabotage myself because, and maybe it's through perfectionism or in a different way, maybe I abandon myself and not give myself enough credit or faith in myself to accomplish something. And I don't let myself succeed. And I do this because innately, down to the root of my being, I believe that I am not enough, because no one's told me anything different. No one's shown me an alternative in the innate areas of my body. And why I'm bringing it down to the root chakra level is that the root chakra is our hardwiring. It's nonverbal, pre-verbal, which means it's deeply embedded in our personality and how we're operating in the world. And it's slower. It's not always shiftable quickly. It takes a very long time to heal and release issues that are held at the root chakra, because we've lived with them for so long and they've been part of our cellular form. So yet, here I am in this example saying that innately I'm not good enough. Innately I am not enough. And my sabotage or my saboteur has a job. And the job is to remind me of that, is to bring me back home to my root, to what's there, the energy I'm vibrating in, I'm marinating in. That's home to my, to my history. That's my tribal root energy. Now, of course, it's not serving me, but the job of the saboteur or the sabotage aspect in myself is to keep me in that energy, is to keep reminding me of that energy and having me stay in that energy until I shift that energy, until I start working on the deep-rooted subconscious beliefs that I'm carrying in myself about myself. This is why, and I go back into this work here in the course, specifically with the chakras, and when we work deep on the soul level, on that DNA level, it's why it's so important that we start looking at this from an energy healing perspective. Because yes, there may be awarenesses, and you may be able to draw lines and aha moments, and you can connect the threads, but innately to shift the energy in the body requires us to go into a deeper subconscious state. We can't always get there through the cognitive frontal lobe, through that, trying to problem solve it or understand it. Sometimes understanding it gets in the way. It's breathing and feeling and awareness and willing to release the energy held there. And again, root chakra is slow. So sometimes with the root, when we have, rooted issues in that area, including shame and including fear, it's also where we hold deep subconscious fears in the root area of the body. And that fear can motivate shame or shaming. That energy, it can take a while to move and clear, but through energy work, we can start to go in there more directly and identify what's there in that area of the body to start processing and releasing the energy. So that, again, is another reason why, that's another part of the work, I should say, that we're doing in this program.
Okay, wow. So much to talk about here. We have time for a few more questions and we'll get into those. But before we do that, I want to give you a few details about the course itself, because as usual, people are asking about that, and I'm ready to give you the details. Once again, the name of the course is Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA. And this is going to be really a powerful 7-week journey with Wendy and her expert guidance, where you'll clear negative energy restricting beliefs that are embedded in your soul's blueprint from your childhood, past lifetimes, family lineage, and more, as you've heard. And the 7-week course takes place on Wednesdays at noon Pacific, starting Wednesday, February 5th. And if you can't join us live, I know a lot of people are concerned about that. That's fine. You won't miss the teachings. You will receive audio and video recordings, transcripts, and all course handouts on your course homepage. And also, I want to remind everyone that the Shift Network offers a no-risk money-back guarantee on all of our courses, giving you a full 2 weeks until February 19th in this case, to make sure that this is a good fit. We want you to be happy. Also, as an added option, all participants are welcome to connect in a private Facebook community group so you can stay connected with one another. Also, everyone who registers receives the Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA bonus collection. First, you'll receive a video teaching from Wendy entitled Detox Patterns of Over-Responsibility, Shame, and Guilt to Find Your Emotional Center. And then next, you will get a guided audio healing from Wendy called Clearing the Energy of Others from the Past and Present to Make Room for Your Divine Self. And then you'll receive a set of 6 powerful guided audio meditations from Wendy entitled Transform Through Emotional Healing, Release Emotions from the Past. And when you register by midnight Pacific, Wednesday, January 29th, you'll receive this extra gift, and that is a video teaching from Wendy entitled From Striving to Thriving, Nourishing Your Should for a New Decade. Okay, so Wendy, before we get back into questions, let's talk a little bit about what you're most looking forward to sharing in your new course.
I was just thinking as you're reading the bonuses that one of the things that in my experience, obviously I'm an energy healer and I work with a lot of people and clearing energy and through these courses. And I just keep coming back to this anchor of how important it is to clear our energy. It's just like we're just in this time right now where it's so it's our time. Consciousness is arising. We are evolving. We're creating a new system to exist in. The old system is currently a shame-based system, and it's not meant to, but it's based on fear. It's not always conscious, but it's in the collective. And as we're here doing our inner work and expanding and becoming more grounded, we are healing on a collective level, and we're changing the system. It's not fast. It's slow. It takes a while to change a root chakra system, but we're doing that work. And one of the things I'm so excited about in this upcoming course is even we're really working on shame on that DNA level, on that spiritual DNA level, looking at it and processing shame on the intergenerational level, what you've taken in through your being from your lineage and how you're holding it in your body, and how to honor the lineage, how to honor it without shaming it, actually, without making it wrong, because we can do that to our own history. I mean, of course, there's a lot to say about our history and what we've been through, and some of it's good and some of it is terrible, but it's honoring what the information that has come through and what we are holding and who we are out of these experiences, and at the same time releasing what is keeping us from expanding into who we're here to be. We're also going to be working with we're going to work with body shame, which for some that means physically, like weight or looking a particular way, what we're carrying on a physical level in our body, and how we shame ourselves around ourselves physically, again, based on what we might be experiencing in the system. But I'm taking it a step further to say that the shame that's really embedded in the cells of our DNA on the physical soma level of our body. So we're going to be exploring more about the body shame, and working with this piece about the tribal shame and the bonding experience of shame, and how you're shifting your new bonding in this world, how to exist in this world from truth and from center. It's a powerful time right now, and this is the time to do this deep work. And so I'm just really excited to support you in processing energy you don't need to be carrying anymore. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, again, so much to talk about. This is such a big topic, and thank you for teaching the course, because obviously people have a lot of questions about how to do this. Let's take a question here from Tammy, who says, with the lower chakra wounds and energy displacement that you mentioned, Can subconscious shame create an energetic split between the left and right sides of the energy bodies, or is this the displacement pushed to one side?
Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly can. It can split that. It can split anywhere. When we go through an experience where the soul has to displace itself on some level, usually that's due to trauma. And it's not always trauma that's acute. Sometimes it's chronic and complex trauma, but there's a sense of in order for me to survive, I need to move to the right, move to the left, move to the center. We don't always, well, I don't want to say that we don't always exit. Some people do have an experience of exiting the body if there's been, a trauma that's been severe. But what happens is this is the way the soul takes care of itself. This is the way our body compensates when something is just too difficult to live through. And so that it is a level of disassociation that happens. And so the spirit can lift up in the body and live just in the higher half of the body. And when I say it can live in the higher body, it doesn't mean you don't have any consciousness in your lower body, but predominantly it can move to particular areas of the body. It can also move back, or it can move forward, or it can move, to one side, and certainly create that feeling of split. And again, that can be split from upper to lower body, to right to left, from back to front. So yes, people can experience that through the feeling of a split.
Okay, thank you. Let's do a question here from Anne, who wants to know what's the connection between anger and shame? What's the role of anger in healthy generative adulthood? And why is the anger of women so hard to hear?
Hmm. It's like I hear that and I want to take a deep breath on that question of why anger in women is so hard to hear. And I'm taking that to mean that women, the feminine, has been so suppressed and so abused in many ways. That's maybe a strong word to use, but maybe it's appropriate. And that's generationally. It's past life, and we know history. We know history and what and how women didn't have rights, and now they do, and and so on. I mean, we keep going. There's more, but the why is it so hard to hear? Part of this, I want to give voice to the fact that part of unshaming, part of healing shame, is also allowing ourselves to acknowledge and feel our feminine in our body. And when we've been suppressed, male or female, on the feminine level, that means creativity, that means sexuality, that means being able to have our emotions, that means being real with how we feel, being truthful in how we feel. Those are some examples. When we've been suppressed on that level, suppressed anger is rage. That's what suppressed anger is. And so when we start that process of starting to feel again and allow that anger to start to come up and out, the anger, when it's been suppressed, is big. And it needs to come out. It needs to be big. And sometimes that anger is corrective. Sometimes it's course correcting, meaning sometimes if we've been living through life where our pillar has been bent on some level, like I am going through my life sideways. I feel like I'm not in myself or grounded. We can get angry enough to put ourselves back into right alignment. Or when something's incongruent or something is out of alignment in a situation or with an individual, we can get angry enough to correct the situation in ourselves, or bring ourselves into right alignment and into truth. I believe that the voice of the feminine is rising within all of us, male and female. And part of that is through what can be considered as sort of an opposite of shame, which is empathy. And it's through to have empathy. Ultimately, we have to be willing to feel our own feelings. and be able to connect to the emotion. And to do that, we also need to be able to breathe through the shame of those emotions or of the experiences that those emotions are connected to. And it's through this power of I'm going to soften and breathe through shame and connect to myself and breathe through the fear of being able to communicate or have empathy for an individual or for myself even. This is part of a feminine, it's like it's the shift. It's like a shift in where we are collectively evolving. We're evolving with more empathy and this conversation of shame, in on the table now. Now, I just want to say this because someone might ask, is it always appropriate to have empathy if the situation doesn't feel safe? And I would say, no, it's not always. Sometimes the most important thing is to have empathy for yourself and what you need in a to create safety for yourself or to be safe. But with anger, and why I would say, you know, there is a lot of corruption, that we're certainly moving in a world right now where immense shadow, and maybe it feels like the feminine's not being heard, but I also feel that the feminine is continuing to make her voice known, and there's a lot of rise, and it might be a good to connect with others who are also speaking this and sharing this information and speaking truth, and its power in numbers. I mean, find those groups, find those collectives who are making change and are letting their feelings be heard, and because what's underneath that anger is heart, ultimately, wanting kindness, wanting connection, wanting heart and goodness and humanity. And so I guess I'm presuming, based on, because I'm not clear that the question is related to what I'm saying, but yeah, the feminine is rising and the anger is being expressed and it is being heard on some level. It just needs more power in numbers. We're doing it. It's just, I would say, I mean, I believe this for myself, is to just not back down, keep doing it, keep going. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Wow. Again, big question, big answer. Thank you for that. Again, you've already sort of touched on this, but this question takes us in a little bit of a different direction. The question is, when we go into the meditations to rewire our DNA, what's actually happening? Are we changing our aura, energetic body, which will then have an effect on the physical body? And can you give an example of maybe some of the results that you've seen?
Yeah. So when we're talking about the spiritual DNA, we're talking about the core center of the body. We're talking about the central channel primarily. It's throughout our system, but I'm not necessarily referring to the aura per se, being that the aura is radiant and responsive to what's going on in the interior of the body. So when we're working with the spiritual DNA, we're actually guided into, and that's either visually felt or through a sense of knowing, and some people hear. So people will go into meditation and resonate in meditation, in guided meditation, excuse me, according to their aspects of intuition that are strong for them. So, for example, if you're a strong visualizer, then you might be able to follow the journey on a visual level. If you're more of an empathic feeler, clairsentient, you might feel the energy more so in the body as you're going through a guided healing. And so, what happens is when we bring awareness to pictures and images and imprinting in the body through breath and through awareness, you're bringing clear consciousness, and we're starting, and I guide you through the particular issue that's there, and it's almost as if you're rewriting the story in your body. It's as if in that moment, if it felt like you couldn't fight back for yourself, then in through the guided meditation, there's a moment where you can stand up for yourself. And that imprinting, when we start to shift energy on the body, what happens is that the brain doesn't always know the difference between what's present or what's perceived, meaning what's happening here in this present moment or what the energy body is going through in that moment to change a story in the body, change how we're holding energy in the body. And so when you go into the guided meditation and you're guided into the center core of the being, you're invited to unblock, clear, or I'll say rewrite the story that's held in your system. And when you do that, you start to increase the presence of light consciousness in your body. In the central channel of our body, we are ultimately it's our dwelling place for self or for soul in communion with divine grace, with God. And so that's, ideally at the core center. Yet we're human, and lots of things get into the central channel. And when they do, they become core issues or core wounds. And so part of our healing work is starting to move some of these core issues and core wounds out of the center consciousness of our being, where they have been the most hardwired, where they've been part of our belief system and our existence. And as they move out of the central channel, they start to become less impacted. We start to have a little more separation from them. We can identify them, and they become a little bit more subjective to us. We might catch ourselves instead of, by default falling back into a belief system or even a pattern. So what happens here is that as we're clearing, energy here in the spiritual DNA and through the central channel, we are also moving the energy through the body and clearing it physically through the body. And some people, it's a range. I mean, some people will say, oh my goodness, I had this pain in my body and it's gone. And some people will say, wow, through that meditation, I started to have some pain and discomfort. That's part of clearing too. Or some people will say, wow, after that meditation, that was so deep and profound, but I cried for an hour. That, I started to feel grief. That's part of the healing at work. So I've seen sort of everything, the gamut, I think. I mean, I can't, I'm sure there's something I haven't seen, but in terms of what people experience after going through these deep guided healings. And the intention is that when we go through the clearing, we're also replacing, we're also creating space for more of your truth and your light and your expansion to fill into the core of your being and to take up space in your body. And that's ultimately, really the goal underneath healing shame through this course. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, within the time constraints that we have, that was a really good answer. This has just been an intriguing conversation. Looking at the clock here, we're just about out of time. So I want to go ahead and thank our viewers for being with us today and for all of your really, really good questions. As we've seen, it's going to take 7 weeks to answer them all. So once again, Transform the Shame in Your Spiritual DNA starts Wednesday, February 5th. And again, please visit transformingshame.com to learn more and to register. So, Wendy, with this little bit of time we have, do you have any final thoughts?
Just in closing, I invite you on this journey, if you're open and you're willing and you're resonating with the awareness that shame is something that has been keeping you from feeling more centered, grounded, and true to yourself. And if it feels like you are ready to embark upon this powerful journey of releasing deep and old embedded shame in the body, I look forward to supporting you and invite you to join me in this 7-week course.
All right. Wow. Well, thank you again, Wendy. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and today's conversation was no exception. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been an honor. Thank you.
You bet. Wow. And once again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. On behalf of all of us at the Shift Network, I wish you well and look forward to having you on this course or perhaps another one in the future. Have a great day, everyone.